For decades, Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell have been painted as Hollywood's golden couple, the living proof that love can survive fame, pressure, and decades of public scrutiny. To the world, they look perfect, always smiling, always laughing, always inseparable. Their chemistry seemed effortless, their bond unbreakable, their happiness permanent. But what people saw on red carpets and magazine covers was only a fraction of what their relationship truly held. Behind the glow of cameras, behind the interviews and romantic anecdotes, Goldie lived through moments few ever knew about, years of distance, unspoken resentments, emotional heaviness, and quiet sacrifices that nearly broke them apart. The world fell in love with the image. Goldie had to live with the reality. Now, at 76, she reveals the truth about Kurt Russell, the man she loved, the man who changed her life, and the man who challenged her in ways she never expected. Before Goldie and Kurt ever became a couple, she saw him from a distance as a young actor being groomed by Hollywood's machine. Kurt was born into an entertainment family. His father, Bing Russell, was a veteran actor who appeared in hundreds of films and television episodes, and his mother, Louise, was a dancer who understood the demands of performance. From a young age, Kurt was surrounded by ambition and pressure. Goldie now admits she always sensed something different about him, a groundedness, a seriousness, a quiet discipline that set him apart from other rising stars. What the world didn't fully see was a weight he carried even as a teenager. His family lived for the business, and Kurt learned early that success wasn't optional. Stability depended on his ability to perform. Goldie understood this much later, but she acknowledges that it shaped him long before she entered his life. Kurt's early Hollywood years were marked by unusual intensity. At just 9 years old, he signed a long-term contract with Disney, becoming one of the studio's most recognizable young faces. Walt Disney himself admired Kurt's natural talent, leaving behind a handwritten note simply stating Kurt Russell on the day Disney died. For many, it was a touching piece of trivia. For Kurt, it became an ever-present reminder of expectations he never asked for. Goldie reveals that he came out of that period with a complex relationship to fame. He didn't chase attention. He didn't trust the industry easily. And even when he excelled, he carried a quiet fear of disappointing the people who believed in him. Goldie learned that the confident, charming man the world admired was also someone hardened by years of early responsibility. But the part of Kurt's past that shaped him most wasn't acting. It was baseball. Long before Goldie re-entered his life, Kurt had his heart set on becoming a professional ball player. He wasn't just dabbling in it. He was genuinely skilled. He played in the minor leagues and was on track to advance until a tragic shoulder injury abruptly ended his dream. Goldie reveals that losing baseball left a mark on Kurt that never fully healed. Acting became his career, but baseball had been his identity. When that dream was taken from him, it left behind a deep sense of frustration and loss that he carried silently. Goldie says this was one of the first truths she learned about him. He didn't show sadness the way most people did. He buried it, locked it away, and let it harden into something unspoken. She came to understand that much of Kurt's quiet intensity came from dreams interrupted, ambitions crushed, and chapters he never got to finish. When Goldie and Kurt reconnected on the set of Swing Shift in 1983, she saw a man shaped by discipline and disappointment, charm and caution, strength and unresolved pain. By then, Goldie had already lived through her own share of heartbreaks, marriages, motherhood, and career highs and lows. She was not a young woman looking for a fairy tale. She was someone who had experienced enough life to understand how fragile real love could be. What surprised her was not Kurt's humor or confidence. It was how much he held back emotionally. He wasn't closed off to protect himself from her. He was closed off because life had taught him not to depend on anything he couldn't control. Goldie reveals that in the early days, Kurt's guardedness made it difficult for her to understand how deeply he cared. He loved intensely but quietly. He showed affection through action, not words. And for someone as expressive and emotionally attuned as Goldie, that difference created misunderstandings and early friction. Their public image may have looked effortless, but Goldie now admits the beginning of their relationship was anything but simple. The distance Kurt carried from his past, the disappointment he never fully healed, and the weight of expectations he had grown up with all followed him into their partnership. Goldie didn't fall in love with a flawless hero. She fell in love with a man battling his own history, his own insecurities, and the memories of a life that demanded too much from him too early. She revealed that before she ever built a life with him, she first had to understand the boy he never truly got to stop being. When Goldie and Kurt finally came together in 1983, neither of them was looking for a perfect romance. Both had lived enough life to know that love wasn't a fairy tale and that relationships demanded patience, honesty, and emotional endurance. But even with that awareness, their early years together were far more complicated than the public ever imagined. Goldie now reveals that the beginning of their relationship carried a subtle tension she didn't expect. Kurt was charming and warm on the surface, but emotionally guarded underneath. He had walls built long before they ever reconnected, walls shaped by childhood pressure, career disappointment, and the constant demand to perform. Goldie quickly realized that loving him meant learning how to move around those walls without trying to break them down by force. As their relationship progressed, the reality of combining two lives with children, careers, and past wounds became increasingly difficult. Goldie had 2 children from previous relationships. Kurt had a young son as well. Creating a blended family wasn't seamless. Goldie admits that, behind closed doors, the stresses of coordinating parenting styles, schedules, and emotional expectations caused arguments that the public never saw. They struggled with balancing work and home. They struggled with setting boundaries. They struggled with understanding each other's communication styles. Goldie was expressive and open. Kurt was quiet and guarded. There were times when she felt he withdrew into himself, leaving her to interpret silence instead of words. Those moments created emotional distance that Goldie worried would grow into something permanent if they didn't learn how to bridge it. Despite those struggles, they built a life together slowly, learning each other's patterns. But the years ahead brought challenges that shook their relationship even deeper. Goldie reveals that one of the most difficult periods came when Kurt faced the loss of both his parents. In 2003, his father, Bing Russell, died. Bing had been Kurt's foundation, the person who taught him discipline, work ethic, and integrity. Losing him struck Kurt harder than he ever admitted publicly. Goldie remembers that period as one where Kurt retreated emotionally. He wasn't angry or explosive. He was quiet. He handled grief by shutting down, slipping into long stretches of silence that left Goldie unsure of how to help him. She didn't take it personally, but she couldn't ignore the heaviness his withdrawal brought into their home. She reveals that this was one of the few times when she genuinely feared she might lose the emotional connection they had worked so hard to build. That fear resurfaced years later when Kurt's mother, Louise, passed away in 2014. Goldie explains that the loss of his mother affected Kurt just as deeply as his father's. He went through another period of emotional distance, becoming quieter and more withdrawn. Goldie carried much of the household's emotional load during that time. She supported their children, managed daily responsibilities, and tried to maintain stability while Kurt processed his grief alone. She reveals that this second wave of loss brought back memories of the earliest struggle, reminding her how fragile relationships can feel when grief overtakes one partner and the other is left standing in the dark, waiting for connection to return. During those years, Goldie admits there were moments when she questioned whether they were drifting too far apart. Not because they didn't love each other, but because emotional distance can form silently. Careers, family responsibilities, grief, and the pressure of fame all pushed at the edges of their bond. Goldie reveals there were nights when they barely spoke, not out of anger, but exhaustion. There were times when they communicated more through actions and conversation, because neither had the energy for long discussions. She remembers moments when she wondered whether they were becoming 2 people living parallel lives, close in proximity but overwhelmed by their own individual burdens. But Goldie also acknowledges that during this period, she learned the deepest truth about Kurt. When he was hurting, he didn't run. He stayed. He showed up physically, even if he struggled emotionally. He didn't disappear into work. He didn't look for distractions. He remained present for the family, even if his grief made him distant at times. Goldie realized that stability doesn't always look like constant affection or emotional openness. Sometimes it looks like consistency, loyalty, and quiet endurance. She reveals that understanding this truth changed the way she viewed their relationship. She stopped expecting him to express emotion the way she did. She began recognizing the ways he communicated love through action rather than words. Goldie also reveals that one of the turning points in their relationship came when they chose to step back from Hollywood's constant noise. They focused more on their family, on their home life, on creating a stable environment where neither of them had to perform or pretend. That decision allowed them to reconnect in a way they hadn't in years. They rebuilt their emotional rhythm slowly, not through dramatic conversations, but through shared days, small habits, and mutual understanding. Goldie says that rebuilding wasn't glamorous or magical. It was practical, deliberate, and grounded in the decision to choose each other every single day. By the time they reached their later years, Goldie understood the full depth of Kurt Russell's character. He was complex, shaped by early fame, lifelong expectations, and painful loss. She reveals that loving him required patience, empathy, and the ability to see past silence into the loyalty underneath. Their relationship had survived because they stayed through difficult seasons, not because everything was perfect. And as she looked back on their journey, Goldie finally understood why their love endured. Not because it was flawless, but because it was real. As Goldie looked back on the decade she spent with Kurt Russell, she realized that the world never saw the truth of their relationship. People saw the laughter, the interviews, the effortless chemistry that made them look unshakable. But they didn't see the choices behind that stability, the moments when she questioned everything, the moments when Kurt's silence felt heavier than words, and the moments when their life felt less like a partnership and more like two people fighting separate battles while trying not to drift apart. Goldie reveals that the true strength of their relationship didn't come from perfection. It came from surviving the seasons when things were far from perfect. One of the biggest truths Goldie shares is that Kurt was never the man the industry tried to make him out to be. To the public, he was confident, charming, tough, and effortlessly grounded. But privately, he was a man shaped by decades of pressure, expectations, and responsibility. Losing baseball didn't just end a dream. It reshaped his entire sense of identity. And growing up under the shadow of family ambition taught him to hide his emotions rather than share them. Goldie says this created a kind of emotional armor around him, one that was strong enough to protect him from pain but thick enough to make him hard to reach at times. She reveals that loving Kurt meant learning how to read him in silence, how to understand his moods without explanations, and how to trust the sincerity of his actions even when his words were few. Goldie also addresses a long-standing question the public always wondered about: why she and Kurt never got married. Over the years, countless interviews, tabloid headlines, and public debate circled around the subject. People assumed they avoided marriage because of fear, past trauma, or commitment issues. Goldie now makes it clear that none of those assumptions were true. She reveals that their decision not to marry was a conscious choice made early in their relationship. Marriage, to her, was never the foundation of love. Staying was. Choosing each other every day without a legal bond felt more meaningful than a ceremony or a contract. Goldie explains that avoiding marriage wasn't about rejecting the idea of commitment. It was about honoring the commitment they already had. She always believed that staying because you want to is stronger than staying because you promised to. Goldie also reveals that Kurt felt the same. Marriage had failed them both before, and neither wanted to repeat old patterns. They didn't need rings to prove loyalty or love. Their relationship was built on shared life, parenting, support, and mutual respect, not paperwork. Goldie says the real truth is simple. The lack of a wedding never made them less devoted. If anything, it made them more intentional about staying connected through every stage of life. It forced them to communicate, to choose, and to protect their relationship without relying on tradition or obligation. As they moved into their later years, the emotional storms that once caused distance between them softened into something steadier. They learned each other more deeply, understood each other's rhythms more naturally, and accepted each other's flaws more gracefully. Goldie reveals that Kurt mellowed with time, not by losing his edge, but by opening himself more willingly. He became more vocal, more expressive, more vulnerable. And Goldie, in return, learned to interpret silence not as detachment but as reflection. She grew more patient, more grounded, and more attuned to the man he truly was beyond the persona the world admired. Goldie reflects on the hardest truth of their relationship. Staying together required continuous choosing. When Kurt grieved, she stayed. When she struggled, he stayed. When they felt disconnected, they worked through it. They didn't romanticize their bond. They built it brick by brick, choice by choice. Goldie reveals that the truth about Kurt Russell is not that he was a perfect partner. The truth is that he was a real partner, the one who showed up even in silence, the one who protected their family fiercely, the one who stood by her when Hollywood became overwhelming, and the one who challenged her in ways that ultimately made their love stronger. As Goldie turned 76, she says the story people think they know is just a surface. The real story is about two individuals who found each other not because everything aligned perfectly, but because they were willing to work through the moments when it didn't. She reveals that Kurt taught her that love doesn't have to be dramatic to be powerful. It just has to be consistent. It has to survive the quiet days, the dark seasons, the misunderstandings, and the losses. It has to be chosen again and again, even when it's easier to let go. In the end, Goldie says the truth about Kurt Russell is simple. He was a partner who never walked away. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't always easy. But he was steadfast, loyal, devoted, and genuine. And that, she believes, is why their love endured longer than most marriages. It wasn't built on fantasy. It was built on reality, messy, complicated, and deeply human. What do you think? Did Goldie make the right choice by building a life outside traditional marriage norms? Or do you believe things would have been different if they had tied the knot? Tell us your thoughts below. And if you want more untold stories from Hollywood's most iconic couples, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next.